The Association of Marketing Service Providers is pleased to present today's webinar program, Information Overload Data Management. Today you will learn key components of data management from two perspectives, organizational and functional. Topics covered will include transitioning from individual desktop data processing to a data processing department, receiving an organization of data files, and handling agreements. Also covered will be primary and necessary programs, essential human capital needs, and key services to expand with those that bring value. My name is Tyler Keeney, MSP's Director of Member Satisfaction, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Please note that today's call is being recorded and all participant lines will be muted during this broadcast. You may receive technical assistance by sending an email to michelle@amsp.org and we will respond promptly. There's also a chat feature built into the webinar for questions or requests for technical assistance. We have highly qualified staff ready to help you get connected. Today's presentation will last no more than 60 minutes and includes time for questions. You may ask questions at any time throughout the webinar using the webinar chat system in the dialog box, which should be to the right of your webinar screen. If you can't locate the chat box, once again, email michelle@amsp.org and we'll help you locate it. You may ask questions at any time using this feature, but please be aware that they will not be answered until the end of the presentation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Joining us today are Tom Bush of Successful Business Strategies and Ken Orr of ICS Marketing Services. Tom has been a business entrepreneur, president, and owner of several businesses in his 32-year business career in Wisconsin. He joined the mailing and printing industry in 1990 with the acquisition of Accurate Business Service, Madison, Wisconsin, where he grew the company from a small firm to the largest direct marketing, mailing, data, and fulfillment firm in the Madison metro area. Shortly after selling the business in 2007, he created Successful Business Strategies, LLC, to provide critical consulting services to the mailing and printing industry and small businesses. Ken has over 26 years of experience in the marketing data processing industries. In 1990, Ken and 4 partners formed ICS Marketing Services, where Ken has served a key role in forming the process, production, and data processing capabilities that have been the foundation for the organization. His leadership abilities and broad technical, mechanical, and process understanding play a significant role in ICS's ability to make things happen for their customers. Without any further delay, I'll turn the webinar over to Ken and Tom.
Thanks, Tyler. This is Ken Orr. Welcome, everyone. Tom and I are hoping to walk you through some of the functional and organizational needs for the data processing environment as we see them. We bring kind of 2 different perspectives hopefully you'll find valuable. Tom, in an effort of being a business owner and also a consultant now, consults with businesses on how to take care of some of their business data processing strategies. And I can speak to you kind of from my own company's perspective on how we handle things. So hopefully between those 2 types of situations, we will bring to you the value that you're hoping to get from the webinar. So in this case, there's the slide that then indicates what we're hoping to cover from structural, education requirements, data service requirements, and then the functional needs of creating a scalable data processing environment, naming conventions, quality control, handling agreements.
Ken, thanks. Ken and Tyler, appreciate the introduction. This is Tom Bush. Today, the first slide that I have up in front of me is talking about data management and why it is so essential to our businesses. Most everyone who is listening today pretty much understands that there is a value to the data that you do process, yet not everyone fully understands the real value that the data work represents. And the reality is that data, in many cases in this industry, is your competitive differentiator versus your competition. The very first paragraph in here talks about the fact that the right list dominates a part of the direct mail program. We've been taught for a long time in this industry that there are 3 key factors that make up a successful direct marketing program, and that is the list, the offer, and the creative and the copy. Usually 40% is the number that is applied to the list and to the offer out of 100%. Of course, I argue that if you've got a bad list, it really doesn't matter what happens with the other 2 components. So we know that, in essence, that data is so important to all of us today in what we do in the industry and do for a living. Another key component or signature in this process is a recent statistic that I came along, which says that 63% of current communications today in the direct marketing world are either segmented data or personalized one-to-one marketing data, or it's all data-driven. This is obviously a pretty significant game change from 5 to 7 years ago, when most of the business was driven more on a dartboard approach. So my belief is that data may be, or probably is, your primary differentiating service or value compared to your competitors. As an owner of a print, mail, and fulfillment company for 17 years, I quickly came to understand that the commodity side of the business and the shrinking margins associated with most letter shop and print services were a problem. And I was competing simply on a cost per thousand. So I preferred to compete on unique services and earn higher margins. Through trial and error and interviews with my customers, I learned that many of my clients were clueless about how to manage their data and how to grow their business. And they didn't really understand all about data enhancement tools. So we started building data enhancement as a cornerstone to our business. We took our data department from 2 individuals to 6 individuals over a relatively short period of time. We were handling over 5,000 jobs annually and employing large amounts of data hygiene services as well as segmentation and personalization. The net result of what we built over those 6 years is that 40% of our bottom line profit was derived directly from data revenue. And our bottom line profits increased over 100% in a 6-year period prior to selling our company. So obviously data was very important to our company and to our growth. So when we talk about data today and its essentiality to business, it's quite evident. When we move on to our next slide and talk a little bit more about what clients want today, there are really 4 things that strike me, and this is as I've been working with 12 different companies over the last 5 years. What they've told me, what their clients have told me. Clients today want increasing differences or different instances of dialogue. They're looking for other direct marketing initiatives besides direct mail. So we're looking at that as a primary factor. Number 2, they're looking for a better quality of leads. People are always looking for fresh data, always trying to understand how to improve their data, and this is becoming very, very important. They want to better understand which programs are providing the best results or ROI. And because of budget constraints and time constraints, they're trying to optimize their efforts and trying to deal primarily with one vendor or at the most 2 vendors to handle all of their direct marketing needs. Here's the key to me. The key is that you hold that key because you have the data. As part of this business structure, you run the data, you manage the data, and you can provide unique data intelligence. That data intelligence allows you to provide strategy, testing methods, a roadmap, and of course back-end analytics to provide true answers to your customers. So advantage to you goes to data and how you maintain it, how you improve it, how you grow it, and how you measure it. One of the next things that are an essential part of this process is determining how much labor is involved in your IT staff. With the knowledge we have on what the clients desire, we always ask the question, how does your data department look and how does it fit into the client needs today for staffing solutions? My belief is that we have 2 types of data departments, either data processors or data enhancers. I find that most data processors have 1 or 2 individuals that are staffing their department, and they primarily are doing most of the work. This includes the daily network administration, troubleshooting of all kinds, as well as doing the usual work for customers, including data work, laser work, hygiene work, etc. Data enhancement departments typically are larger, usually having 3 or 4 key staffers. Ken and I have talked about this quite a bit over the last few months and talked about who we believe to be the key staffers that are almost essential today if you're moving into an MSP platform or program. And this allows you to kind of make a comparison of where where companies are in that process. We've looked at 4 key ingredients or 4 key processors in a department that we think are essential today for structure. And that includes a IT manager, and we feel that that IT manager should be not only a manager of the department, but obviously a solution provider to clients, being able to be an extension of your sales team and provide solutions to clients and to your sales staff. Number 2 is a data processing lead or supervisor. This one belongs to somebody who must have a lot of vision and ability to think outside the box to solve a lot of your complex client needs. Third is a newer element. We usually today call this a cross-media or integrated marketing specialist. Usually this is somebody that's involved in web design or web creation or web enhancement, along with providing email support programs, and generally a creative specialist, someone that does understand digital media and cross-media, and probably one that also has some unique HTML experience. The last key component to a program is obviously if you have the ability to have a programmer, it's great to have that unique experience and support in your department. Ideally, we like to see people that have a 4-year degree from a university or college or a 2-year technical degree. However, if those are not always available in your market or for a key position, it's most important to look at critical thinking skills or people that have been involved in a long-term employment and have used continuing education as a part of your program. So take a look at your structure and see how it compares to this. There's no right or wrong, but we just see more and more departments today having the features of these 3 or 4 personalities to grow into an MSP platform.
The other part of your data processing environment that I think is vital is simply just creating some terminology and actually coming up with kind of a basic way to discuss the jobs and the functions of data processing in your company. This is especially critical as you're trying to move away from maybe where you have a couple individuals that are really good at it, but they each kind of have their own process that they do, and you kind of rely very heavily on them doing it the right way to get to an end result. And what I believe is if you're going to actually create kind of a processing environment that's scalable, it starts with just making sure everybody's talking the same terminology as far as how we classify jobs and data files and things like that. I also think it's critical that you establish kind of how your network will be designed. In our environment, we start off with a jobs folder, and then within the jobs folder is by the job number is a subdivision of folders. But you create a structure that is easy to understand and easy to navigate, and in a common place where you know where your assets are going to be located. Another key part of that is creating a common incoming data file receiving process. This could be an FTP site. This can be even an email site. At ICS, if you send something to data@icshq.com, it comes to a central hub where we're monitoring that activity, looking for those files to come in. And then we have a structure for placing them in a pending area, waiting for them to be claimed by the customer service folks or whatever the program may be. And then lastly, if you're going to have that kind of an approach, I think it's important you set what response standards you're going to use so your customers know you received the data, and more importantly, you have an understanding within your own environment of when somebody has to look at that. It's one thing to receive it. The worst case scenario is when you actually receive a data file, but the job isn't going to start while you're waiting for other material to arrive for a few days, and then nobody actually even looks at the data file until it's time to start the job, and oh, wait a minute, the file's empty, or there's a problem, or some elements are missing. So it's critical that you set kind of what your response standards are going to be. For us, it's a 24-hour time frame. We're going to make sure we've opened it and basically done some counting and QC checking. The other part we do when we talk about consistent terminology is we actually divided the jobs that we do here at ICS into 3 different components. One-time job, reoccurring jobs, and ongoing jobs. And while probably, 90–95% of all the work we do we would classify as a one-time job, here's a particular project, your client sends in the file, you marry it up with the assets and do the work. There are other jobs, though, that require maybe a suppression file or job instructions from prior jobs or letters that were used in a prior job that you need to bring forward. And in those cases, we actually consider those to be reoccurring jobs. They're going to happen more than once throughout a year, but they're maybe not scheduled type of time. So we actually set up a separate area for those to archive that information so that it's easy to find, easy to bring forward as you're getting ready to start the next occurrence of that job. And then lastly, if you have monthly, daily, weekly, whatever types of ongoing jobs we call these are regularly scheduled types of activities. Maybe we do a statement billing process for a local township here. So in those environments, we actually use a 3-character kind of project ID that's a structure that we keep a log of so that we know. That way you can develop your software, you can develop your files around a common 3-character type of architecture that stores and tracks your jobs. So those are keys to being kind of in a consistent, scalable environment. The next thing that we require within that, and this kind of looks most specifically at the one-time job, which is, of course, what most of us do, we also require that every one of the job folders we set up has these 4 subdirectories within it. And then it's very, very important that you follow everybody puts the data in those proper folders. So obviously, the original data is just that. It's whatever we receive from the client, raw, we call it. It would be the critical information, job instructions, anything that would have comes in the original data folder. The data folder that we then do in the next one is where we actually do a lot of our work, interim files, anything that happens kind of as part of setups or processes or things like that. The third one is where we put all the documentation that will be required, from special instructions to this would be places maybe where you might have a CAS report or you might have your NCOA documentation. And then lastly, we actually set up what we call an outgoing folder, and this contains anything that we would send to the client as a final file. So if they are going to actually receive NCOA documentation or merge-purge reports or whatever the job calls for, all of that information goes in the outgoing folder. Even the actual production mail file, even if we're going to inkjet the job after that, the final production file that's used would go in this folder, so we can always know, we can locate whatever the production folder was when it was done through the data processing environment. This slide is kind of examples to take that a little bit further and give you maybe some specifics on how our company does this. We use a 5-digit job numbering system in our environment. So what we always do is the requirement is that is the first 5 characters and then followed by consistent file names afterwards. And this is a very important thing as you migrate away from individuals doing it where they kind of call files similar names or so on. This really helps you set up so that you can always go back in, find information that you need. If you're looking at the .lst file, for example, that is the actual file that's going to be fed into the inkjet for printing. The .dat we use is the input to a laser printer. So those are kind of just some basic examples of how we try to make sure that we are consistent with all of our names of our files.
On the organizational side, if you currently are seeking to grow your data marketing services but lack capital or personnel at this time, you may find some alternative measures to grow. I've worked with a number of different businesses that have or are in this process right now. And in essence, there are 3 avenues to this. One is to build, one is to buy, and the third is to partner. Each has its own unique advantages and disadvantages if you are launching off into this process or just currently considering it. If you consider building this, it's the most difficult. It's the most time-consuming, and there's a fair amount of trial and error. However, some people prefer to do this because the second option is to buy or acquire assets or talent. I found this to be the most effective method. It obviously brings you the most immediate injection of expertise, know-how, and system support. But of course, it will be costly, and it's something that you must consider the risk factor. The third option is to partner. This tends to be the easiest step. It allows you to test the waters with one or two services, and it also provides some immediate short-term assistance, which increases your ability to meet client demands or client requests while thinking about or working on longer-range solutions for MSP integration. When we talk about, the help that's out there, the first thing that comes up that Ken and I have both talked about is the ability to possibly outsource your IT infrastructure or network administration. I see this as a continuing headache and problem at countless businesses that I have consulted with. It seems to be an ongoing fire every day of taking care of network problems, of computer malfunctions, of all kinds of host of things internally that can happen in a company on a day-to-day basis, which drains your time and ability to effectively work with your customer. So we always suggest that you maybe take a look at either local or regional sources of good network IT administrators who might be able to take over that day-to-day responsibility of managing your network administration. So think about that and think whether that might be one source of help. Most of these are on a very cost-effective basis. A second option is to look at securing a relationship with a third-party vendor that is currently in MSP. This is found either on a local or a regional basis, and there's been a strong strength in this on regional marketing agencies as well as specialized vendors, and those vendors can be specializing in email services, in mail tracking. They can be MSP standalone service providers that have reseller platforms or programs. The great thing about some of those folks is they can allow you to dip your toe in the water at a very low or starting level. They have great support and systems in place, so you can scale this over time but learn as you go. So I find this is a great way to think about getting into MSP programs if you're not there. Another option is to search a couple or a few of the MSP folks that are out there, talk to them, learn how they have been moving their company in that direction. Those folks can give you a lot of insight and in-depth information and knowledge about where you want to may take your company as you consider whether you will build, buy, or partner your relationships going forward. The next thing is to talk about is where do you start? Where do you think about adding a key service or two to your data center or to your company that starts you down the MSP road? While there are several, I wanted to just bring to the forefront a few where some of my clients have started, where I've seen people start, and have had pretty good success. And this is in no particular order on the slide that you see here. It's just more a matter of thinking of where each one of these might fit into your company and whether one of them might be a great first place to start. Number one that I listed here is mail tracking. Obviously, with IMB full service coming very soon, and with the ability for clients now to look for more information which can be powerful and allow them to use mail tracking to enhance their customer experience, it's a great way to start. There obviously are vendors out there today who support mail tracking, so it's a great area to consider going into with a great partner already in place to provide that niche service for you. The second service I put up here is data profiling. It's a favorite of mine because it brought me my largest client a few years ago. Data profiling is a process where you sharpen insight into your client customer information simply by taking your customer database, running it through a third-party vendor data file, and finding all kinds of statistically relevant information which focuses on finding more prospects through demographic and psychographic profiling. There are many national profilers out there, either at data houses or at reseller platforms, that can provide you with this service. In my particular case with my client, the client was an insurance company that was looking for a way to get into Medicare supplement insurance and had been using a print and mail firm. Through the process, they were unhappy with the results, they were unhappy with measurements, and were looking for a new and effective way to do so. We proposed taking their data of over 600,000 records and running it through a profile process to learn more about their client to allow them to market differently. The end result is the profile process allowed us to gain the business. We were able to provide a unique service that was not provided by the other competitor. Over the course of the next year, we brought in over $632,000 of new business, which all started with the data profiling and, of course, touched every component of our business from there on. So I find profiling to be a very unique service that is something that can be easily adapted in any organization. The third is website integration. Many of you may be dealing with that right now, and that relates to all kinds of requirements by people who are looking for email campaigns, pro campaigns, the ability to create landing pages, surveys, support telemarketing programs, a whole host of services that can go through website integration. And the last process, also another favorite of mine, is lead generation campaigns. You know, there's been much discussion about lead generation and the fact that most direct marketing campaigns now require up to 7 touch points to finally get a prospect to respond to your campaign. So while it may lead off with a simple prospect direct mail campaign or letter, it may be followed up by email, by telemarketing, and by various other formats. So again, I've seen many cases where people have started with very simple lead generation campaigns. This is broadened out into a whole host of services. The next thing to think about is, as you're thinking about where you will go and how you'll move from mail shop to data center, you need to think about what strategy is involved in this. And there are 4 or 5 critical steps to the process. For me and for several of my clients, the number one process is meeting with your top clients, understanding their needs, understanding whether they are interested in some possible MSP services that you may be able to provide or are willing to provide, and learning what that interest level is. So it's important to meet with these folks, understand the needs, and also talk to some prospects who might be outside of your current customer list. Number 2 is, of course, to study your competitors, understand where their strengths are, and see how dominant they are in your market. So you will be able to determine the competition factor and determine where you will compete against those folks. You need to then, of course, determine how you're going to grow the process, whether you will build it, buy it, or partner. You'll need to understand how you will market this, and more importantly, how you will sell this. There is a whole different set of selling requirements and skill sets, so you need to understand what's involved in selling this process, what type of capabilities and talents your salespeople will need to bring to the table, or who you may have to hire, and what type of budget and time horizon you have for the program. You need to define what your value proposition will be and what values are best suited to deliver under your current scenario. And the last thing is that, again, selling MSP requires a completely different skill set, not only in your sales, but in your experience level with your support people. So you'll need to determine if you have the right people sitting in the right seats, or whether you may have to consider some options to be able to provide the necessary tools to move into MSP.
The next area of data processing that, well, now that you've kind of organized and have kind of a scalable environment, I think is important to talk about is the archiving process that you use for all the data that we're receiving nowadays, and also coming up with kind of a standard protocol on how you handle customers' data. This is not a one-size-fits-all process, so what I try to do here a little bit is bring some of my company's standards to you to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of how we organize and process it. So obviously, when the incoming files come in, we have a process where basically it's between 60 and 180 days, and a lot of that depends on the type of data we're handling, whether we have agreements in place with customers to dispose of their data at a specific time. Otherwise, I like to think that by the 180-day mark, we really not going to have to answer any questions about the data, do any research on past projects. We're pretty safe to be able to move that data into a longer-term storage environment or actually delete the data. A key point in what we're always looking for, though, too, is to bring up is we do not archive or store any Social Security numbers or driver's license data or personal information that is sensitive in nature that we could expose ourselves to a problem if somehow, some way our worst nightmare happens and we end up on the, somebody has broken in, somebody has taken a laptop home, lost it, whatever, thumb drive. So we don't store that data as a matter of course. We create standard timelines, as I mentioned, for kind of the rest of the data process. We're going to keep the production files stored for 90 days. And then the reports and the job details on our network up to 180 days and then archived off. And we retain those for up to 2 years. It's interesting as you look at how this evolved. We used to actually take pride in the fact that we could go back to a client's environment of a file 2 years ago and bring that forward to use. And anymore that the data has changed so much that that would be a complete waste, and there's not anybody in their right mind that would look at pulling a file that's 2 years old forward and using it again. But there are times and on occasion where we have had maybe the letters or some of the buck slips or that type of information that were used in a prior job that sometimes our clients will lean on us to find and bring forward because our systems are more advanced and better organized than their own. We do a quality control process as well that I think is important to talk about as another step when you move into kind of a department approach of quality control, is establishing those procedures. And what we do is actually come up with some very rudimentary, I would say, or standard basic checkoff sheets. And we require that all of these are checked off and completed in kind of a team fashion. So if the data processor does it, there's a checkoff sheet that includes counts and questions about that process. And I have a couple examples here I'm going to show you in just a second of actually physically what they look like. And then, but the key is we don't want any one person to potentially just rubber stamp a checkoff sheet or push the data on through. We always have at least 2 people involved in a checkoff process. So whether it's your project coordination team or customer service rep, along with the person doing the data processing, or in the event of maybe a laser process or an inkjet process, we actually will involve the inkjet operator and the customer service rep, or the laser operator and maybe the customer service rep, or even the laser department manager if you're structured that way. But the key is we don't want to put it in a position where one person doing a checkoff sheet just kind of checks off, they've been doing this all day and know exactly what they're doing, and really put them in a position to kind of blow past one of the quality control steps and then put us at risk. Because let's face it, the amount of data that we're handling, the quality control impact that can have on your company, it can be devastating for not only your credibility but also just financially. No matter how hard you work, I think that's all of our worst nightmares, is the time when we have some kind of quality problem. Here's an example of actually one of our checkoff sheets to just kind of show you a visual of what I mean by a simple process where we actually are doing in count and out count and actually determining some percentages that we can actually use as a barometer to hopefully, in our case, if you have the code 1, we call it, or CAS process is what it's referred to now. If that's in the mid to low 90s, well, that sparks a question to find out what's going on there, what potentially has happened with that file. You'll also notice that I require up in the corner there kind of the handwritten notes of the initials of whoever the data processor is that worked on it. And then it's up to them to also use this as a way to put information on the bottom if there's questions. In this case, there was a question about the duplication, that merge purge report, that it looked like the dupes all appeared to be individuals. So we require that kind of information to be presented on there. It's good for backup as well. This is a sample of a laser print checkoff sheet that we use, and in this case, we actually will require the person that sets up the letter to sign off, the coordinator or customer service rep, and then in the operations area for us, that's actually the laser operator. And I will tell you that most all of these questions come with some series of pain behind them. When you ask questions like, is the endorsement line present? As there in the old days, did we have 62 bars in the barcode? Did somebody count them? Does it fit into the template? All those kinds of things are put in place here, and this is added to and just part of our standard quality review process. And as you'll notice, we have certain areas where we don't require maybe one or two of the people to do it because it's only about the setup person. But in this case, it's all part of us trying to develop a process that makes sure no one person can just make a mistake and have some big consequences around that. The other thing I wanted to address with you is the data processing agreements that are kind of becoming more and more readily passed around out there by customers, or even in some cases, if you're working for maybe an agency, their customers will require documentation. The top two are primarily the ones that I come across most of the time from a non-disclosure agreement or the data handling agreement. And while the documents are very similar, sometimes there's a little more information and legal wording around a non-disclosure agreement versus sometimes the data handling agreement are just you're going to have somebody's file and you're going to use it for suppression only, and you're going to basically sign the fact that that's all it'll be used for. The NDAs, I would encourage you to make sure that in my case, I review all of these on behalf of the company to make sure that I understand there isn't any kind of caveats or things in there that put us at undue risk that I wouldn't agree to. I find most of them are boilerplate, pretty straightforward, but still it's important to look for and look through for any special concerns that you may have. And I also think it's important that you raise those concerns with your customer if you have them, rather than just view that as you don't want to be a problem for them or cause some kind of a barrier to do business. These are important legal documents that I think you need to make sure you're paying attention to and ask logical questions around. We also, in my case, I'll show you an example here in a minute of, we log all of these agreements so that I know who sent them to me, when I received them, and it's just a great thing to have in the background, because there are a lot of times a salesperson will call me up and say, do we have an NDA in place with client Y? And it's great to be able to go out there and say yes or no, and even if it is yes, we do, but that is 4 years old. So if they're okay with that, we're okay with that, but maybe they're going to want a new revised document to be put in place. The actual SAS 70 approach here, I just bring this up, it's kind of like an ISO standards. If you're not familiar with that, it's a very high level, very detailed type of data processing agreement, not normally used by my customer base. I think you'll see this more maybe for some government agencies or some big time companies that will require that. I don't have a lot of experience with it. I just wanted to let you know that they're out there. Normally, if I have somebody that comes to me and says, do you have a SAS 70, are you compliant? Normally we come back and say, well, no, that's not our process, but we have other types of documentation, NDAs, things like that. And we also participate in security audits on a fairly regular basis for a couple of our customers. And it's actually been very good for us to also put those documents together in response if somebody has a question about what do you do for security documentation. Sometimes we use that as a way to prevent them from having to have us go through a bunch of multiple pages on their end. If we have some documents that have been put together and well thought out on our end, sometimes that's sufficient for the client. But as I said, make sure you log and track that material. Here's a basic example, and I mean this is nothing more than just I do this alphabetically by the companies that we work with a little bit of the dates, and it's just a matter of being organized so that you can respond to your customers if they have a question about what you've already signed or not. And with that part of it, this is kind of where I get into what I'm hoping from a functional takeaway perspective, what I've illustrated here at a high level gives you is kind of a way to organize your data files, set the naming conventions and the process that's important for you to follow as an organization. Set up some archiving and storage parameters. Don't get into the trap of just adding more hard drive space to your network because it's fairly readily available and cheap. I think it's important that, as hard as that is to talk about structures and strategies for getting rid of data, it's vital that you don't end up with just a bunch of old stuff laying around that becomes more and more difficult to determine whether it's valuable or not. I think it also, the more you have, the harder it is if somebody's looking for something for you to find it in an efficient manner, and that sometimes doesn't bode well for you if you have to do a lot of searching to get back with a client to see whether you have something or not. Make sure you track all of your agreements, review those, and have those available in case you have any questions or concerns about that. And I guess lastly, you can never have enough quality control in our data processing environment, and each one of your own situations is unique, but I would encourage you to do the hard work of setting up a process, do that review. We actually keep and log any quality control problems, what was the cause, who did that, what was the recommended change that we need to make, and it helps us document and demonstrate to our staff and our customers that we are not perfect, but we have a very solid process for handling anything that does happen where we have a quality issue in play. And then, kind of lastly, in the bold at the bottom, the obvious, it's easy to set up a process. It's much harder to make sure that it's working properly, and it's also just as challenging to continue to refine that and hold true to those processes. So I can't emphasize enough that it's any of these types of processes are starts, not the ends, and to just continue to reinforce your quality control, look for problems and situations that arise that everyone seems unique. It's amazing how you get there sometimes, but it's an important part of the learning and in developing a quality data process.
From an organizational point of view and piggybacking off of Ken's information, these are the primary takeaways that I have found in the next part of your process with MSP. There are 3 or 4 strategic items here. Number one, the biggest problem that I have found is at the very top of the list, and that is ownership buy-in. While everybody would like to be an MSP, and while everybody right now is thinking of new ways to commit to change to their businesses, the strength of this lies at the top and with ownership. Ownership must support this process, and they must lead it. If they're not willing to buy in, if they're not willing to be a part of the process on an everyday basis, it is very difficult for MSP to become successful in a venture. So at the beginning, or at the very beginning of the process, it's really important to write out a plan, to put a budget into place to support the plan, to figure out what your process is going to be, to have specific targeted goals, to form teams and responsibilities, because in essence this is obviously not a 1 or 2 person performance. This is a whole group of people within an organization which will eventually involve everyone in the organization learning about the structure, understanding where you're going, figuring out how the process goes. But it starts at the top, and most failure is because ownership does not support it at critical junctures in the process. As I said previously, strategic planning is really important. You need to understand if you're going to work from your strengths. In other words, if your company has unique strengths or unique capabilities, you need to determine whether you're going to use that as your jumping off point for moving into the data world and into MSP. It's a great idea to talk to your AMSP peers who are out there right now, who have done this or are in this journey at some point. Talk to them, get to see them at the conference in San Diego, ask them about what's been successful and what's been not. You gain more knowledge and information through the networking process at AMSP conferences or through simple phone calls to each other. You know, members are generous with their time and sharing in this, so I urge you to find out what others have done, learn from their mistakes, understand where they've had successes, and then relate that to how you think you're able to move your company. The third point is talking about how this will change your company. The biggest problem that I have seen other than ownership support is, again, being able to market and sell this service. Many companies go in with a great deal of excitement, but unfortunately have the wrong people in important positions in the company. You may have a sales staff that might be seasoned, but they've been selling either printing or mailing for 15 or 20 years. Most of those folks will have a difficult time transforming into an MSP process. They've been in the same type of job for a long period of time. They understand transactional selling really well, but don't understand solution selling. So they do struggle with this. And the same, of course, can be said for IT. If your IT department is primarily those that are doing pre-sort hygiene work and not have been involved in integrated support services nor in some of the new social media platforms, they may have some difficulty in moving as well. So you need to think really hard and assess whether you have the right people in the right seats to be able to sell and to be able to support. If you don't, you have to go back and think about build, buy, or partner and determine how you may have to adapt or change in order to be able to have the right people in those seats. It usually only takes one or two key people to really provide a new emphasis. The other part that's important to understand in the selling and the marketing process is that it takes a long time to sell this type of service compared to transactional sales. You know, the average time for MSP service adoption is anywhere from 3 to 9 months, with 6 months being, I would probably say, the average. So from time that you engage a prospect to time that you actually close that business and begin your journey with that client will take anywhere from 3 to 9 months or even longer, and is likely a series of sales calls, and not one individual calling on a client, but probably 3 or 4 people from your company who are selling the unique benefits in different parts of the process. So again, it's very important to understand that, understand how others have done it, and understand how you need to transform your company to be able to meet those needs. You also need to think about who you're going to target. Whether you've got a specific set of clients right now in your top 10 or top 20 list where you can talk to them and assess those needs, or whether you might have people that currently are outside of your current customer base, but people that you feel would be very interested to hear a message that is different than what you're selling now. I know there are a couple AMSP members right now that have found more success actually going outside of their current customer database, and have done so by prospecting very strategically. Another area where I found great success, and this is from a couple of clients of mine, is related to vertical markets. If you have a vertical market where you're strong right now or moving very strongly into that market, it's a good time to talk to your customer in that vertical market that is your biggest customer and entertain with them the idea or the process. If they're interested in that, obviously your ability to grow and grow much faster will happen much more quickly in a vertical market setup. So look at that as a possible solution. And the last part of this is, again, a key, and that is the survival and the growth rate. The very last sentence there said 59% of all U.S. printers, and this is printers, this is not mailers, 59% of all U.S. printers today offer some type of MSP services. So the question that is out there is, where are you today in that process? Because printers are already there and are moving swiftly there because of the changes to their industry. Mailers probably understand this as well, but the market is changing very, very rapidly. So if you're not there, you have to make a decision soon. If you are there, you need to determine if you need to adapt quickly or move faster into either the build, buy, or partner phase to move your company forward because changes are happening quickly, as you probably all know. With that said, that is the end of our discussion here at this point. So Tyler, I'm going to turn it over to you for Q&A.
Thank you, Ken and Tom. We have now come to the question and answer segment of this webinar, as Tom just mentioned, where audience participation is requested. So please submit your question now through the webinar system using the chat box through the dialog box on the webinar screen. That's in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll give them just another minute to see if any questions come through. Okay, it looks like I have a question. What do you do if clients continue to email data files to individual sales reps rather than your common receiving area? I don't know if that's better addressed to Ken or Tom.
I can take that one, Tyler. This was one of the issues as you kind of migrate into kind of a common area that you have, a lot of times your clients have what they believe is almost a personal relationship with a sales rep or customer service rep within the organization, and now you're going to be asking them to kind of send their file to a generic inbox. But I think when you explain the fact to them that it's a common controlled environment that allows us to log the data, make sure we receive it, and actually there's a process behind it, I think then it makes sense to them that it not only is going to be cared as well as before, but actually there's a big benefit if the sales rep's on the road or isn't in a position to get the data file. It doesn't just sit in their inbox or they miss it somehow, and so it never gets received. So that's how it's a conversation we usually have, and once you explain it, it usually makes sense to the client.
Okay, thank you, Ken. This question is actually also for you. What software do you use for data manipulation?
In our environment, we actually use, we use the BCC product suite for a lot of the postal stuff, and then we use Perl and C# to write scripts and do some of the other work that are involved, along with we use SQL as the platform for our database. I think we still have some old Fox Pro kind of structure around, but I would say primarily Perl and C# are the two that we use.
Okay, thank you very much. How about this one? Who makes the call on what type of job you are setting up?
In our environment, if there's a file that's coming in and we're not sure exactly what it is, then usually the customer service manager is kind of at the throttle to determine, okay, this is a job that's a one-time job that we're going to do and not, or this has a couple file elements that are suppression files or letter copy that may be referred to in the future because it's a quarterly thing. And so then usually they'll be the ones to kind of make that call. But it needs to be, if you're going to go down that process, you need to have somebody in a position to make a call and put it in the right classifications. So in our case, it's kind of our customer service manager that makes those calls.
Okay, thanks, Ken. How about Tom? Let's try this question for you, Tom. With the clients that you consult for, who in the company is typically responsible for creating the quality control sheets?
I'm not sure if that'd be a question for me or more for Ken.
In our company, with the quality control sheets that are put together, they're actually at kind of the department manager that's responsible for the different aspects of that. So if it's the data processing, then our IT manager is looking at what the sensitive parts of the data are, where the potential issues are, and helping make sure those are in place. If it's the laser printing, then it's in the laser area. They are the responsible parties for making sure that the sheets are put together and followed. The actual customer service rep will kind of do the initial workup on our sheets and put the job information and title headers on, but then they're actually the responsibility of the department managers to make sure their staff is following those, filling them out, and then bringing them up for any kind of review if necessary.
Ken, on one of the reports that you were showing, did I see Jet Letter listed?
You did. We are a Jet Letter PSL vendor, that's our main vendor for printing our variable data and doing a lot of our laser printing. So yes, we've actually migrated with Jet Letter for over many years because of the functionality that and the price points that it offers a company in the mailing environment.
Okay, I was just curious. Well, with that being said, I don't see any additional questions, so we'll go ahead and start to wrap up. It's now time to conclude today's program, Information Overload Data Management. Thank you to our presenters, Ken Orr and Tom Bush. If you'd like to hear more from them, they will be co-presenting with Connie Hill of Vera Centra another session on data management at the 2013 AMSP Annual Conference in San Diego, California, and more details can be found on the AMSP website. This concludes today's program, and we thank you for your participation. The webinar will automatically end, and at the end of the webinar, you will automatically be directed to an online evaluation. Please take a few moments to answer the survey and give us your feedback on this webinar. Your comments and suggestions are very important to us as they help us to provide you with continued quality educational programming. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.